It started with a scream and ended with silence. I was brushing my teeth when the sirens went off, blaring metallic wails that split the night like a bone saw. It was 11 p.m. on the dot. My first thought was, tornado. That's what sirens mean in our little town of Grayditch, Missouri. But there was no wind, no lightning, no ominous green sky. Just a perfectly clear summer night and a noise that made my teeth chatter. Then I heard something worse. A second sound, faint, shrill, and unnatural. Like a distant choir of voices trying to mimic a siren, or maybe the siren was trying to mimic them. I'm not sure. All I know is the second sound didn't come from any speakers. It came from everywhere. I looked out my window. The streetlights had gone red, not blinking, not broken, just glowing a deep, hellish crimson. The air shimmered like a mirage. And then people started walking, not running, not stumbling, just walking. Men in bathrobes, women in slippers, teenagers still dressed from whatever Friday night hangouts they'd been at. All of them heading in the same direction, downtown. Their eyes were wide, faces blank. One man I recognized, Mr. Crowley from 3 houses down, was muttering something under his breath. I cracked the window open to listen. 11 for the watcher, 11 for the gate. I slammed it shut. That's when my phone vibrated on the nightstand. Emergency alert. 11 p.m. lockdown in effect. Stay indoors. Do not follow. Do not make eye contact. Ignore knocking. Do not answer the door. No agency name. No sender. Just that. I've seen prank alerts before, and this didn't feel like one. My hands were shaking so hard I nearly dropped the phone. Then the screen flickered and died. Not just mine, every device in the house went dark. My laptop, the TV, even the digital clock on the microwave. All dead. And then the knocking started, not a pounding, just a polite, insistent rapping on the front door. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 more. I crept toward the peephole. I don't know why. Maybe some stupid part of me hoped it was just a confused neighbor. Maybe someone who needed help. But when I looked through, I saw a face I didn't recognize. It wasn't a neighbor. It wasn't anyone. The figure was tall, unnaturally tall. It wore what looked like a funeral suit, but tattered and soaked like it had been buried in it. Its skin was pale gray, stretched tight over its skull. It didn't blink. It didn't move. Just stood there, grinning like it knew I was watching. And then, without touching the handle, the door creaked open an inch. I ran, straight up the stairs, into the bathroom, and locked the door behind me. I could hear the slow creak of floorboards, not rushed, patient, calculated. That's when the air changed again. I felt it, like static electricity crackling up my spine. The siren outside warbled and died. But something else took its place, that low musical hum, the voices again, getting closer. I pressed my ear to the bathroom door, silence. Then from downstairs, a single whisper, one word. Midnight. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't dare. After that whisper, midnight, the house fell into a silence so complete it rang in my ears. I waited in the bathroom until the light started bleeding through the edges of the blinds, cold and grey. The kind of light that makes everything feel fragile. When I finally crept back downstairs, the front door was wide open. But no one was there, no muddy footprints, no sign of forced entry. No signs at all, just an empty hallway, my doormat twisted sideways like someone had shuffled their feet on it. The phones were still dead. So was the power. I couldn't even get the car to start. I tried turning the ignition, but it made a sound like something choking. Not a mechanical grind, but wet, like an animal trying to breathe through a collapsed throat. I stopped after one attempt. Something was wrong with this town. I stepped outside to test my theory, half expecting to be surrounded by neighbors again. But the street was empty, deserted. Even the birds were silent. No traffic, no dogs barking, no wind. The air was still and wrong. I spotted Mrs. Ellis, my across-the-street neighbor, sitting on her porch swing. She looked dazed, rocking slowly, staring out into space. I called her name. She didn't even flinch, just kept swaying, her lips moving in a soft chant I couldn't make out. I backed away. Every instinct screamed at me not to go closer. Instead, I jogged a few blocks over to my friend Nolan's house. We'd known each other since middle school, and if there was anyone in this cursed town I could trust, it was him. He answered after 2 knocks, eyes bloodshot and breath smelling faintly of whiskey. "Jesus, you saw it too?" he asked before I said a word. I nodded. "The sirens, the people walking, the thing at my door." Nolan stepped aside. "Get in. You're not the only one who got visited." Inside, the house was cluttered, his usual chaos, but something else hung in the air. The smell of burnt copper and mildew. He had every mirror in the place covered with towels and blankets. "You see that alert?" he asked, pulling out his phone. It was dead, like mine. I saw it. Said to stay inside. Not to answer the door. Don't make eye contact. "Yeah," Nolan said grimly. "They call it the Watcher's Hour." He took a deep breath, then dropped a file folder onto the coffee table. Newspaper clippings, printed forum posts, handwritten notes. Been digging into the town's history for months, thought it was just a weird rabbit hole, until last night. The articles detailed strange events going back decades, people vanishing at night, reports of phantom sirens, entire households found burned out with no signs of fire damage. One post from a conspiracy forum dated 2014 caught my eye. "Greyditch is a test site. Look up Watcher's Hour. It's the same time every year, June 3rd, 11 p.m. Red lights, sirens. He comes. And when he knocks, it's already too late." "This isn't new?" I asked. "Looks like it's been happening for generations," Nolan said. "But not every year. It skips. Sometimes a decade, sometimes a few years. But every time it returns, more people disappear." I stood up, pacing. "Why don't more people talk about this?" "Leave? Because they don't remember," he said. "The ones who survive, something wipes it, clears it out. But I've got insomnia, never sleep past 10, and I guess you're just unlucky enough to still be awake when the sirens hit." I wanted to laugh, cry, scream, but I couldn't do any of it. My brain was already chewing on what he'd just said, wiped memories. What if the people walking last night were the ones who'd survived it before? Nolan paled. Reclaimed. That word hung in the air like mold. I sat back down, legs trembling. "What do we do?" "There's someone who might know more," he said. "Old guy named Whitaker. Lives out on Bramble Road near the forest edge. Used to work for the City Planning Commission back in the 80s. Disappeared for 6 months. Came back all messed up. Talked about things below the town." I didn't like the sound of that. Nolan grabbed his keys. "We go see him tonight. Before 11, before it starts again." I hesitated. What if the sirens come early? They never do. Midnight is the feeding hour. 11 is the warning. "Feeding?" He gave me a bleak smile. "You really want to know?" I didn't. But I nodded anyway. He opened a drawer and pulled out something that looked like an old cassette recorder. One of Whitaker's tapes. I got it through a guy who sells weird stuff online. "Listen." He pressed play. Static. Then, "They come through the red cracks in the sky, eyes like street lamps, mouths like storm drains. Don't answer, don't speak, don't open the door. He watches from the trees. He..." Click. "Recorder dies every time at that spot," Nolan said. I looked at the clock. 6:38 p.m. We had a few hours until the sirens. I hoped. Outside, a single streetlight flickered and went red, then back to white. We stared at each other. "Is it starting early?" I whispered. Nolan looked out of the window. "Let's move. Now." We drove in silence. The streets of Greyditch were still deserted, but something felt off, like we were being watched from just beyond the periphery of the headlights. The sun had dipped below the hills, leaving behind a bruised purple sky that bled slowly into black. "Bramble Road's about 15 minutes out," Nolan said, keeping his eyes on the road. "Whitaker's house is at the end. No neighbors. Closest structure is an old water tower." I nodded, gripping my seatbelt. "You really think he'll talk to us?" "He used to rant at town hall meetings before they banned him," Nolan said. "But yeah, he'll talk." We passed the last gas station on Route 11, its lights flickering, its windows plastered with newspaper, and turned onto a cracked road flanked by tall trees. A battered sign announced, Bramble Road, no outlet. I swear the moment we turned onto that road, the air changed. It felt heavier, thicker, like the atmosphere had gained weight. Shadows stretched too long, the trees pressed inward. I saw something move between the trunks, tall and thin, like a person standing just out of reach of the headlights. But when I turned to look, nothing was there. We didn't speak again until the road ended at a rusted metal gate, chained and padlocked. Beyond it was a winding dirt path leading up to a sagging Victorian-style home surrounded by dead hedges. The place looked abandoned, windows boarded, porch sagging, chimney crumbling. "This is it," Nolan said, "Whitaker's place." We got out. The temperature had dropped by 10 degrees. Crickets stopped chirping the moment we stepped past the gate. Even our footsteps sounded muffled. The front door was unlatched. It groaned open as we approached. "Mr. Whitaker?" Nolan called out. "It's Nolan Graves. We need to talk." No answer, just the creaking of floorboards and the faint rhythmic click-clack of something upstairs. We exchanged a glance and stepped inside. The interior smelled of damp wood and old paper. The wallpaper was peeling in long, curling strips. Books and newspapers were scattered everywhere. Most of the visible headlines were torn or faded, but I could make out snippets. 11 p.m. Do not sleep. It watches. It waits. Tunnels beneath Greyditch confirmed sealed. 1992. The click-clack grew louder. We followed it up the stairs, which groaned under our weight. At the end of the hall, a dim light shone under a half-open door. Nolan pushed it open. Whitaker was sitting in a wheelchair in front of an ancient typewriter. His back was to us, spine hunched, hands trembling as they tapped the keys one by one. Click-clack, click-clack. He stopped typing the moment we entered, but didn't turn around. "You're early," he said in a rasping voice. "It's not time yet." "We're not part of it," Nolan said. "At least not yet. We need answers." Whitaker let out a dry chuckle. "You already know more than you should. That means the town's chosen you." "Chosen us for what?" I asked. He slowly turned in his chair. His face was pale, sunken, with milky cataracts where his eyes should have been. His lips were chapped and bloodless, but it was his expression that unsettled me. Calm, almost peaceful, like a man who'd already made peace with death. "The sirens aren't warnings," he said. "They're welcomes. The hour between 11 and midnight belongs to him, the Watcher. The sirens open the veil." "The veil?" I echoed. He nodded. "The barrier between here and there, where the town overlaps with the other side. Once the sirens start, we're not in Greyditch anymore." "Not exactly." I glanced at Nolan. "What happens to the people who go out?" "They walk until they're taken," Whitaker said simply, "or until they take someone else." I felt sick. "What about the curfew? The warnings not to answer the door?" He looked down at his hands. "That's not to protect you from them. It's to protect them from you. Once you see the Watcher, really see him, you're not entirely human anymore." Silence. Then Whitaker stood. I didn't even realize he could stand. "I've seen him," he said. "Years ago, 1983. Went into the tunnel under City Hall when they were expanding the courthouse. Found symbols etched into the walls, bone altars. A staircase that led nowhere. And a door." He pointed to his eyes. I opened it. He looked back. Goosebumps rose on my neck. "What does he want?" Nolan asked. Whitaker gave a thin smile. "Not want, hunger. The sirens are the prayer. The walk is the offering." "Why does the town go along with it?" I demanded. "Because it's the cost of safety. The deals were struck long before any of us were born, and every so often he wants to remind us that he's still watching." Nolan pulled me aside. "We should go." Whitaker suddenly turned to me. "You heard him speak, didn't you?" "The one word, me. Midnight," I whispered. His face turned grave. "Then it's already started. You've been marked." I stepped back. "What does that mean?" But Whitaker didn't answer. He sat down again, hands trembling over the keys. "I hear them now," he whispered. Then we heard it too. A distant low whistle. Not a siren, a whistle. It came from the woods, then closer, and then... Tap, tap, tap. 3 knocks. At the upstairs window, we turned. Nothing. Then Whitaker screamed. We spun back toward him, but he was gone. The typewriter was still there, still clacking away, letters being typed by invisible hands. Welcome to the hour. We didn't wait for an explanation. The moment Whitaker vanished, Nolan yanked me by the arm and we bolted down the stairs. The house groaned and moaned around us as if it was breathing or digesting. Every shadow seemed to stretch toward us, hands grasping. Outside, the air was ice cold. We sprinted toward the car without looking back. Just before Nolan hit the ignition, I turned to the upstairs window. There was a figure there, tall, elongated, staring, watching. As soon as we were back on the road, I gasped. That wasn't a hallucination, right? No, Nolan said, and I'm pretty sure that was him. We didn't speak again until we were back in town, coasting along Main Street. The lights were dimmer than usual. Some windows had been boarded up. Others had red chalk markings on the glass, circles with slashes through them. One house had "Stay Inside at 11" spray-painted across its front porch. Do you think Whitaker's dead? I asked. Or taken, or pulled through? Nolan's voice was strained. He said the veil thins. Maybe it just snapped. I shivered. What the hell does that mean? But Nolan wasn't listening. He suddenly pulled over in front of St. Anselm's Church, Greyditch's oldest building. The bell tower stood like a crooked finger, and its stained glass windows flickered with candlelight. We're going in, he said, already stepping out. What? Why? Because if anyone knows what's going on, it's Father Elroy. St. Anselm's was one of those churches that always felt cold, even in summer. The stone walls held the chill like secrets. Inside, it was mostly empty, except for a few lit candles and a tall, weathered man in a black cassock kneeling at the altar. Father Elroy. He didn't turn as we approached. I was wondering when you'd come, he said softly. Nolan cleared his throat. You knew. I've known since the night of your birth, Nolan. Yours and hers, he added, looking straight at me. Something tightened in my stomach. Why do the sirens come at 11? I asked. Why does no one talk about it? Because we've forgotten the real cost of silence, he said, standing. You were both born the year of the last tolling, the year the Watcher demanded twins. Twins? I asked. Father Elroy nodded slowly. Every 30 years it hungers more deeply. It whispers to those chosen, pulls them toward it. When the sirens sound, the gates open, and when midnight comes, they close. Whitaker said something about a door under Town Hall, Nolan said. There are many doors, the priest murmured, but one has never been sealed. Not fully. It lies beneath this church. He led us down a narrow corridor at the back of the sanctuary, then through a rusted metal door marked cloister. No entry. Behind it, a staircase descended into the dark. The air grew damp, musky. The walls were stone, carved with symbols I didn't recognize. The deeper we went, the more distorted everything became. I could swear the walls were breathing. Finally, we reached a heavy iron gate. Father Elroy unlocked it with a bone-white key, and we stepped into a circular chamber. It was ancient. The walls were covered in Norse runes, Latin prayers, and crude drawings of elongated figures with eyes like holes. In the center of the room sat a stone door embedded into the floor, covered in melted wax, chains, and dried blood. This is it, the priest said, the veil door. Nolan stepped forward. Is this where the Watcher comes from? No, Father Elroy whispered. This is where he was sealed. But the seal weakens each time the town forgets. Each time a rule is broken. Each time someone answers a knock. Suddenly, the candles along the walls flickered out. Complete darkness swallowed us. Then we heard it. A sigh from beneath the stone door, a long, shuddering exhale, like something massive stirring after a long sleep. I backed away. We need to go, now. But the priest raised a trembling hand. It's too late. The chamber began to shift, not physically, but perceptually. One moment I was looking at the priest, the next, I wasn't. He had no face, just skin stretched tight and smooth where features should be. He tilted his head as if listening, then screamed in a language I'd never heard. The stone door began to glow. Something pulsed beneath it, a rhythmic beat, like a second heart. The chains started to rattle. Nolan grabbed my arm. We need to leave now. We ran. Up the stairs, past the breathing walls, through the narrow corridor. Behind us, the priest's screams turned to gurgles, then silence. As we burst back into the sanctuary, the church bell tolled once, 11 p.m. The sirens began again, only this time they were closer and deeper. As we stood there, catching our breath, I looked at the stained glass window behind the altar. It was no longer a depiction of Saint Anselm. It was him, the watcher, watching me. We didn't speak as we stumbled out of the church and into the siren-soaked night. The air had changed again. It wasn't just cold, it was wrong. The sky had gone black without stars, the moon a dim smear behind moving clouds. The streetlights flickered, casting half shadows that moved even when we stood still. Everything looked slightly off, like the angles had shifted just a few degrees away from normal. Even the familiar houses around the church had warped, taller, narrower, windows like slits. "We're not in Greyditch anymore," I whispered. Nolan didn't respond. His eyes were fixed on something across the street. A woman stood there, motionless. Her back was to us, arms limp at her sides, long black hair matted and dripping like she'd just stepped out of a lake. Then she turned her head, not her body, just her head, 180 degrees, and smiled. Her eyes were empty sockets, her mouth opened wider than it should, revealing a hollow throat that whistled. Nolan grabbed my wrist. "We run. Now." We bolted down the street. The sirens wailed like 100 dying animals as we ran past house after house, most dark, some lit by flickering candles. We passed a group of people kneeling in the road in a perfect circle, eyes shut, muttering a chant I didn't understand. As we passed, one of them reached out and touched my ankle. "Before we move on, please donate me in the form of subscribe." It felt like ice water crawling up my leg. I kicked loose and didn't look back. We finally ducked into a narrow alley behind the old post office and collapsed, panting. The sirens continued in the distance, but we were hidden for now. "We need to leave town," I gasped. "We tried that," Nolan said, voice shaky. "Remember what Whitaker said? The town doesn't let you leave after the sirens start." "But we can't stay here. That thing in the church—" "I know," he said, "but we can't just run blind." I looked around. Then what? "We find Maddie. She might still be in her house. If anyone has a record of how the town handled this before, it's her." Maddie Hensley was the town librarian and archivist. She'd lived in Greyditch her whole life, and her family had roots going back to the 1800s. She was also paranoid, carried a shotgun, and once banned someone for sneezing on a microfilm reel. Her house was at the edge of Maple Lane, near the tree line. We stuck to the back roads, keeping low and quiet. The things that walked the streets now weren't human, not anymore. We saw them as we passed, a man digging with his bare hands into his own front lawn, whispering, "She's down here, I swear she's down here." A group of children standing silently in a sandbox, eyes glowing like coals. A police cruiser slowly driving in reverse, empty except for a doll in the driver's seat. Everywhere we looked, reality was cracking. We reached Maddie's house and found the front door barricaded from the inside. We knocked in a specific rhythm Nolan remembered from his childhood, a code the neighborhood kids used when sneaking out. A slot opened in the door. One bloodshot eye glared at us. "Don't say a word," Maddie barked. "Not one word until you pass the test." She held up a sheet of paper and flashed a series of symbols. Some Norse, some Latin, some I'd seen carved in the stone under the church. "What's the fourth one mean?" she hissed. Nolan squinted. "It's a protection rune, for travelers." "Algiz." She grunted and unlatched the door. "Get in." We entered quickly and she slammed it shut behind us. Her house was pitch black, lit only by red candles. Thick salt lines coated every windowsill and doorframe. Books were stacked to the ceiling, covering every surface, grimoires, local histories, and what looked like ritual manuals. "You picked a hell of a night to snoop around," Maddie said, pushing a chair toward me. "We didn't pick anything," I said. "The town picked us." Her expression didn't change. "Then it's begun again." "Again?" Nolan asked. She sat down across from us and pulled out a folder. Inside were black and white photos, old ones. Some of them were town celebrations, some funerals. One showed a group of people standing in front of a pit. Their faces were blurred, not by the photo, but like something had melted the emulsion. One woman in particular caught my eye. It was the same one I saw outside the church. Long black hair, hollow smile. She was one of the first, Maddie said, tapping the photo. Her name was Cordelia Withers. She was taken during the tolling of 1893. They said she heard the watcher whisper to her through her bedroom wall. She walked outside at 11 o'clock and never came back. But that was over a century ago, I said. Doesn't matter, time doesn't move the same once the sirens start. That's why nothing works. No phones, no internet, no logic. You're not in Greyditch anymore, you're in the fold. Nolan blinked. The fold, she nodded. A thin veil wrapped around our town. It's a pocket of twisted time and space that opens when the watcher stirs. And it always stirs at 11. So how do we stop it? I asked. Maddie lit a cigarette with a shaking hand. We don't. But maybe, just maybe, we can distract it. She rummaged through her books until she found a torn page wrapped in plastic. It showed a sigil, similar to the ones in the tunnel, and a note scrawled in red ink. Bind the eye. Break the siren. Feed it something it doesn't want. A soul that's already been taken. My skin crawled. What the hell does that mean? Maddie looked at me, then Nolan. It means we need to find someone who's already been claimed by the fold. Someone the watcher thinks it owns. Her eyes lingered on me. What? I whispered. Whitaker said you were marked. That you heard the word. Midnight, I said again. Then you might be our only chance. Suddenly the air pressure shifted. Every candle blew out. The house shook. And from outside, tap, tap, tap. Someone knocked on the window. Then a voice, deep and cracked. Come walk with me. The stairwell was wrong. It defied logic, spiraling downward in a direction that didn't feel like it belonged on this earth. The air was wet and close, like the inside of a rotting lung. The stone steps were slick beneath our feet, etched with unfamiliar symbols that pulsed with a faint green glow, like the heartbeat of something buried. I hesitated on the threshold, the voice still echoed in my skull. One must stay, one must enter, one must bleed. Behind us the fold groaned. A low hum, like tectonic plates grinding, shook the ground. Maddie pressed a rusted iron key into my hand, its teeth sharp and warm. You have to go, she said. You're the one who heard it first. The fold marked you. What happens if I don't come back? I asked. She didn't answer. Nolan put a hand on my shoulder, his face pale and drawn. We'll wait here. Just don't get lost down there. I nodded and stepped into the spiral. The descent felt endless. There were no landings, no changes in the narrow stone walls, only the slow circular drop and that persistent glow from the carvings. I couldn't tell if I was going deeper underground or into something else entirely. After a while, I realized I wasn't alone. I couldn't see them, but I could hear them. Things moving just beyond the curve of my vision, skittering, breathing, whispering. The same voices that had clawed at my window. I tightened my grip on the key, willing myself to keep moving. Then the walls widened and the stairwell opened into a vast cavern. At its center stood a massive rotted door, pulsing gently like a living thing. It was made of a wood I couldn't name, slick, blackened, and covered in chains that moved as if they were alive. Carvings of wolves, serpents, and screaming faces danced across its surface, and there, in front of it, stood Isabel. She looked unchanged. Hair neat, clothes clean, like she hadn't aged a day since she vanished weeks ago. Isabel, I whispered, stepping toward her. Her eyes flicked to mine. You came. I thought you were gone, that you didn't make it out. I never left, she said softly. I made it to the edge of town, and it folded back in on me. The road wrapped around itself. I drove for hours, but only ended up back at the center. She looked at the door. I heard it too. The whisper. Midnight. I've been down here, trying to stop it. But I can't do it alone. She reached out and took my hand. Her fingers were cold. You have the key. The lock needs blood. What is this place? Isabel turned her gaze toward the door. It's the seal, the fold's eye, every siren, every taken soul. It's all to feed this. It watches the town. watches us, and soon it'll open wide enough to let something through. Something shifted behind the door, like the sound of a great beast rolling in its sleep. I took a step back. Why not just destroy it? She smiled sadly. Because it's older than destruction. All we can do is bind it. Buy time. Suddenly, the air split with a sharp scream. Nolan's scream. I turned just in time to see his face flash in my mind, twisted in pain, mouth agape. No, I whispered. Something's wrong. I bolted back up the stairs, each step now burned, the carvings glowing brighter, the whispers louder. When I finally reached the top, I found the bell tower shattered. No roof, just open sky filled with twisting red clouds. Maddie lay slumped against the wall, blood pooling at her feet. Her mask was shattered, her eyes gone. A dark shape stood over her, impossibly tall, hunched, limbs too long. It shifted like smoke and bone, wearing the semblance of a man. It turned toward me. It had Nolan's face, only stretched, hollowed, a crude imitation. "You took too long," it said in a voice like breaking glass. He screamed so sweetly. It began to walk toward me. I stepped back, clutching the key. Then I heard Maddie gasp, "The bell! Ring the bell!" I spun and spotted the rusted rope dangling from what remained of the tower ceiling. The bell itself swayed just above, massive and ancient, with runes carved into its bronze frame. The creature lunged. I ran for the rope and yanked with everything I had. The bell let out a deep, sonorous boom, a wave of sound that shattered glass and twisted the air. The creature reeled back, hissing, its skin bubbling. The sound of the bell echoed down the streets and into the fold. The red clouds above twisted violently. I rang it again. This time I screamed with it. The tower groaned, bricks falling around me. The creature howled and dissolved into smoke. Silence fell. Only the wind remained, blowing cold and dry through the ruined bell tower. Maddie coughed once. I dropped beside her. Her voice was thin. "You have to seal it, the door, before it opens." Her eyes fluttered shut. I sat there, clutching the key, staring at the stairs that led back down into the dark. Behind me, the sirens began to rise again. Not mechanical this time, organic. Like lungs forcing out a warning cry from deep underground. And this time, they didn't stop. The sirens didn't stop. They screamed like something alive, something in agony, and they kept going. Minutes passed, then an hour, and still they howled. I sat in the bell tower next to Maddie's still body, clutching the iron key in my hand. The bell had fallen silent, the last toll echoing through the town like a death knell. The sky above was a sickening red swirl, like a wound in the clouds. The wind blew in short, staccato bursts, each gust bringing with it a coppery stench and the feeling that something was pressing in from the other side of the world. It was no longer night, but the sun hadn't risen. We were stuck in an eternal dusk. I forced myself to stand. The fold had taken Nolan. Maddie was dead. Isabel, if she really was Isabel, was waiting in the depths beneath the tower. And something worse was trying to come through that door. I descended the spiral stairs again, the iron key now burning against my palm. Every step deeper into the earth made the sirens louder, more distorted. I started to hear words hidden inside their shriek. Phrases whispered through radio static. Let it feed. Let it see. Let it know. The carvings on the walls had changed. They now twisted as I passed, forming grotesque shapes. A woman with hollow eyes holding a child with no face. A group of people kneeling in front of a monstrous gate. At the bottom of the stairs, the chamber was different. The great rotted door was open a crack. Only a sliver, but enough to see that what lay beyond wasn't a tunnel or a room. It was a void. A skyless, starless abyss where shapes moved, huge, slow, impossibly distant and yet watching me. I felt them press against my brain, like fingers testing the edges of my mind. Isabel stood beside the door, her hand pressed flat against the wood. "You rang the bell," she said, not turning to me. "I did." "You slowed it down, but not for long." "What is this, Isabel? What's really behind that door?" She looked at me finally. Her eyes were dark, wet, ancient. "You remember when we found the folded road? When the gas stations vanished, the stars changed, the clocks broke. I nodded slowly. We passed through the fold that night, all of us. The moment the siren sounded, we weren't in our world anymore. I felt cold rise up my spine. So, what? We're in hell? She shook her head. Hell is simple. This place is something worse. It's unfinished, a wound in reality, something tore through long ago and bled into Tanner Falls. They built the tower to seal it. The siren was the warning. Why would anyone stay? Because the fold wants you to. It makes you forget the way out. Makes the outside world feel wrong, unclean, unsafe. The longer you stay, the less you question it. A soft bang echoed behind the door, something brushing against it from the other side. Isabel flinched. Mayor Tanner made the original pact, she continued. He offered the town in exchange for his daughters. Loki didn't lie. He gave them back. But not unchanged. They became the first messengers. The first who called the siren. And now? I asked, breathless. Now the fold needs a body. It's getting stronger, feeding off the siren's fear. It's using Tanner Falls like a cocoon. But if the door opens all the way, there's no turning back. We stared at the widening crack. I don't know if we can stop it, she said, but I know how we can bind it. One final time. I remembered the words burned into the stone. One must stay. One must enter. One must bleed. I looked at Isabel. She smiled sadly. I've already stayed. You've already entered. Now. She took a step toward the crack. One must bleed. I grabbed her arm. Number, there's got to be another way. There isn't, she said. The key opens the lock, but blood closes the door. This place thrives on sacrifice. It's the only language it understands. She pressed her hand to mine and wrapped my fingers around the iron key. You have to lock it when I go in. You have to. I was crying before I knew it. I'm not letting you die. You're not, she said softly. You're letting me end it. With that, she turned and walked straight into the crack. The instant she crossed the threshold, the ground shook. The door pulsed like a dying heart. The shapes beyond screamed in unison, and the sirens spiked into a deafening wail that shattered my thoughts. I forced the key into the lock. The door began to close, slowly, agonizingly, as if resisting. A black wind blew from the crack, filled with shrieks and whispers and the scent of burning feathers. My fingers bled onto the carvings. The door screamed, and then, boom! It slammed shut. The sirens cut off instantly. The air went still. I collapsed to the stone floor, heart hammering, lungs heaving, the silence more terrifying than the sound. After a long time, I stood. I climbed the stairs one final time and emerged into a new morning. Blue sky, no red clouds, no sirens. The town was still. Empty, no people, no fold. Just me. And the guilt, Tanner Falls, was silent. No birds, no traffic, no people. Just wind through empty streets, rustling curtains in broken windows, and the quiet creak of signs swaying on bent poles. It felt like stepping into a photograph of the town I once knew. Same shapes, same colors, but hollowed out. Something essential had gone missing. I walked the streets alone for hours. Every home was abandoned, yet signs of life were everywhere. Meals half-eaten on tables, televisions left on, cars still idling in driveways. I passed the school and saw desks full of open notebooks and backpacks strewn across the floors. The town hadn't evacuated, it had been wiped. I wandered toward my house, desperate for familiarity. My own front door was wide open. Inside, everything was still in place, my coat still hung on the rack, my boots still by the stairs, the grocery list I'd scribbled that morning still magnetized to the fridge. But the air was different, flat, sterile. My phone vibrated in my pocket. I hadn't noticed it until then. No signal bars, just a single notification, unknown caller, 11 p.m. I stared at the timestamp. It wasn't 11 p.m. It wasn't even close. It was 4:12 in the afternoon. But the screen insisted. Incoming call, 11 p.m. My thumb hovered over the green button, but I didn't press it. Instead, I powered the phone off and tossed it on the counter. Then, in a haze, I turned on the TV. Every channel was static. Not just noise, but pulsing, rhythmic static. A low thrum beneath the fuzz, like a heartbeat, or the sirens, distorted and buried beneath white noise. For a moment, the screen flickered, and I saw something. A face. Isabel's, eyes closed, lips moving, but no sound. Then gone. I screamed and threw the remote, shattering the screen. The TV went dead. I stumbled outside, clutching my head, trying to make sense of the cracks forming in reality. Had I sealed the fold, or just trapped myself inside it? The sun didn't move. It hung in the sky like a spotlight, frozen just above the rooftops. No shadows shifted, no temperature changed. A looping world. That's when I heard footsteps. I turned sharply, nothing. But I knew the sound, slow, dragging feet, bare soles slapping pavement. I turned down the street and followed it. I don't know why, maybe desperation, maybe guilt. They led me to the park. It looked the same as always, the rusted slide, the broken swing swaying in windless air. But someone sat on the bench. It was Mayor Tanner. He looked human, frail, worn down, but unmistakably him. He stared straight ahead. "You locked it," he said. I nodded. "Good," he murmured. "Means it can start over." I walked toward him, cautious. Start over? This place, it resets. Every time the fold feeds, it heals. For a while. I sat beside him. Everyone's gone. He nodded slowly. Not gone. Displaced. They'll come back in time. When the boundary mends. They always do. Like insects crawling back to a carcass. You made this deal. With Loki? Why? He finally looked at me, and his eyes were hollow. I lost my daughters. You know that. But it wasn't an accident. It was my fault. Drunk, angry, drove too fast. I wanted them back. And he came to me, said he could give them to me. But he'd take the town instead. One soul for another. Then he laughed and said, "Actually, I'll need all of them." He spat into the grass. I agreed. Thought it'd be slow. Thought I could find a way out. You couldn't. No, he whispered. The fold doesn't break. It waits. It eats. And when it's full, it resets the stage and runs the show again. He stood slowly, his bones cracking. You did better than me, kid. You locked the door. You saved what was left. What happens now? He looked up at the frozen sun. Now we wait. Wait for it to crack again. I watched him limp away, disappearing behind the trees. That night, I stayed in my house, not bothering to lock the door. I slept with the lights on, though the power flickered constantly. Dreams twisted through my sleep, visions of Isabel in the void, pressing her hand to the inside of the rotted door. I saw Maddie on the rooftop, ringing the bell as creatures clawed at her legs. I saw Nolan, not Nolan, his face grinning and wrong. I woke to find the sky had changed, not back to blue, but black, stars overhead, but not the right ones, new constellations, alien patterns. The sirens hadn't sounded, but I felt them, like pressure building in the base of my skull. The fold wasn't dead, just resting. I had lost track of time. The days bled into each other, a haze of eerie quiet and unbearable stillness. I tried to do the normal things, eat, sleep, keep moving, but nothing felt right. Every clock in town was stuck at 11 p.m., no matter how many times I reset them. The sun remained frozen, just above the horizon, casting a cold, harsh light that gave no warmth. The sky was an endless black canvas now, dotted with unfamiliar stars, and the wind. It didn't feel like wind. It felt like the air itself was breathing. Before we move on, please donate me in the form of subscribe. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. At night I would hear them, whispers. Soft at first, like murmurs from another room, then growing louder, more insistent. Voices without bodies. The town had been dead, but now it felt like something had come back. Something new. I couldn't go back to the tower, not after what had happened. Not after Isabel had stepped through that door. It was the one place I still feared. The place where the boundaries between the worlds had collapsed, where I had seen the truth. But it was the only place left that made sense. That morning, after another sleepless night, I couldn't ignore the pull any longer. I set out for the tower. The road was empty, the houses like hollow shells, not a single person walked the streets. I tried calling out, shouting into the silence, but there was no response. It was like everyone had been erased from existence, leaving only the physical remnants behind. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking through a graveyard. The tower loomed ahead, its twisted silhouette barely visible against the black sky. The wind whistled through the cracks in the stone, and the door, the iron door, stood open just a fraction, a reminder of what lay beyond. I stepped inside, the air thick with a smell I couldn't place, damp, metallic, like old blood. The walls felt closer than before, and the passage seemed shorter, as though the very structure of the place had changed. I made my way down into the chamber, my breath shallow in the oppressive silence. I didn't know what I expected to find. A clue, a way out, a sign that everything was going to return to normal. But there was nothing, only the deep, unsettling quiet. Until I heard it. A soft thumping, barely perceptible, like something or someone was moving in the shadows. The sound echoed off the walls, slow and rhythmic. I held my breath, trying to pinpoint where it was coming from. Then I saw it. A figure just inside the doorway. At first it looked like a person, standing motionless. But as I drew closer, I realized it was more than that. Its face was obscured by a dark hood, its limbs unnaturally long and twisted. It was thin, emaciated, with skin stretched tightly over bone. The figure's chest rose and fell in shallow breaths, but its eyes, those eyes, stared straight at me, and they were full of nothing. I froze. The figure's lips parted, but it didn't speak. It just stared. The longer I looked into its eyes, the more I felt myself losing grip on reality. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. It felt like I was being pulled toward it, drawn into its emptiness. I backed away slowly, my heart pounding. But the figure didn't move. It didn't follow me, it just stood there, watching. It was then that I realized it wasn't alone. Behind it, the shadows shifted again. More figures, taller, leaner, all faceless, all staring. I couldn't take it anymore. I turned and ran, stumbling up the stairs in a panic. My legs felt like lead, my mind clouded with fear. The chamber behind me felt like it was pressing in, the air thick with unseen eyes. I barely made it out of the tower before the ground beneath my feet trembled. The sirens, they were back. But they didn't sound like they used to. They were deeper now, hunger-filled, as if the very air was vibrating with something worse than fear. It was like the siren itself had become a living entity, calling out to something far worse. I didn't want to look behind me. I didn't want to see what was chasing me, but I could feel it in my bones. The figures had come out of the tower, they were following me. I ran faster, not sure where I was going. The sirens rang louder, echoing in the distance, until they felt like they were inside my head. And then, just as I thought I couldn't go any further, I stumbled into the town square. And I saw them. The people. Not the real people, the ones who had vanished. But something else, something twisted and wrong. They stood in a perfect circle, their eyes wide and vacant, their bodies too still to be human. The figures I had seen in the tower. They were them. They weren't waiting for me. They were waiting for the fold to finish its work. I stopped, paralyzed by the realization that the fold hadn't just been some anomaly. It had never left. It was still here, but now it was everywhere. The people in the square, those things, were just a fraction of what was coming. They had been waiting for the door to open, for the curse to reset, for everything to fold back into place. I backed away slowly, not sure what to do, but then I felt it. The tug in my chest, the pull of something pulling me back toward the tower. And I realized then, the fold didn't just feed, it claimed. The world felt wrong in ways I couldn't explain. I couldn't even look at the square, the people there, those figures standing in stillness, their empty eyes fixed on me, not moving, but waiting. It was as if I was their anchor, the last thing tethering them to whatever was left of the town. And I wasn't strong enough to hold them back anymore. I took another step back, one, then two, and then I turned and ran. I didn't know where I was going anymore. I wasn't running toward anything. I was running away. Away from the town, away from the fold. But it wasn't that simple. The town had become a living, breathing thing, every building a trap, every street a snare. I found myself back at the edge of the forest, the trees looming like dark giants, and I couldn't help but remember the stories. The ones people used to tell about Tanner Falls, the tales of the trees that had grown too close together, their roots intertwined beneath the ground, reaching out for anything that came near. The ones that whispered of ancient rituals, sacrifices and promises made in the dark. I had heard them all before, but now they felt like truths. I stopped, gasping for air, clutching my ribs. The sirens had faded, but they weren't gone. They were inside me now, vibrating in my chest, echoing in my skull. I didn't know if it was the sirens themselves or the weight of everything around me. But I felt it. This unbearable pressure, this suffocating pull towards something I could no longer avoid. The fold had always been here, hadn't it? I thought about what Tanner had said, the way the fold didn't break. It only waited. It fed, and when it was full, when it had consumed everything it could, it reset everything, brought it all back again. A new cycle, a fresh beginning. But this time it felt different. The ground trembled beneath me again, not in the way it had the night of the first siren, but in a deep, resonant thrum, like the very earth was groaning in agony. A shiver crawled up my spine. I spun around, looking for anything familiar. And that's when I saw it. The shadow in the distance, far off at the edge of the town. A figure. But not just any figure. It was lumbering, dragging its legs behind it. Too tall, too wrong to be human. It moved like it was both part of the landscape and separate from it, blending into the trees, yet casting a long, distorted shadow across the ground. It wasn't walking. It was drifting. And then I heard the whisper. It wasn't words, just an insistent hum, like a voice buried beneath layers of noise, too muffled to make sense of. The air around me thickened. The pressure I felt, that pull, had grown so strong, so overwhelming, that I couldn't tell if I was being drawn toward it or if it was coming toward me. I ran again, but this time the forest closed in on me. The trees, the very land itself, seemed to bend toward me, their branches reaching out, pulling at my clothes, at my hair. The ground buckled beneath my feet, rising like waves, pushing me in one direction, toward that figure. I stumbled, falling to my knees. Panic clawed at my chest. I couldn't escape, not this time. But before I could even think, the world around me shifted. The wind stopped, the trees straightened, the earth stilled. And then it spoke. "I've been waiting." The voice came from everywhere, all at once, low and guttural, as if it was carried on the very air. The words weren't directed at me. They were simply there, heavy with the weight of ages. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. I could only stare at the figure as it approached, its form slowly coming into focus. It wasn't human anymore, not by any stretch of the imagination. Its limbs were long, sinewy, covered in black mottled skin. Its face, if you could even call it that, was a mass of shifting shadows, a dark vortex where eyes should have been, but in their place were infinite reflections of something I could never fully comprehend. The figure's mouth stretched open, a wide, gaping hole filled with sharp teeth that glittered in the faint, dying light. It moved closer, its shadow stretching longer with every step. "I am the fold," it rumbled, its voice vibrating the very air around me. "And you opened it. You let me in." I shook my head, struggling to speak, but my words were swallowed by the weight of its presence. The ground beneath me began to pulse, as though it was alive, like the earth itself had become a part of the fold, consumed by it. Everything was blurring, the trees, the sky, the ground, all spinning, all folding in on itself. "You thought you were saving them," the figure continued, its voice softening, like it was amused. "But you were only prolonging the inevitable." I could feel it now, creeping into my mind, into my thoughts. Its hunger. The fold. It didn't just consume the land, it consumed everything. Memories, time, people, and the fold had claimed me. "You can't escape," the figure whispered. "None of you can." I tried to move, but my body wouldn't respond. My mind was fogged, overwhelmed by the weight of the words, the terror that had gripped my chest. The figure moved closer, its form towering over me. Then something else happened. A crack. A faint, almost imperceptible snap. I turned my head, and in that brief moment of confusion, I saw her. Isabel. She was standing in the distance, her body flickering in and out of existence, her eyes empty and wide. "Help me," she whispered. And that was all it took. Something inside me broke. I screamed. The scream tore from my throat, a raw, primal sound that echoed through the trees. For a split second, the world around me seemed to pause. The figure, the dark, monstrous thing looming over me, stopped in its tracks. Its shadowed face flickered, a ripple passing through the dark void where its eyes should have been. And then everything fell apart. The earth trembled beneath me, shaking violently. The air vibrated with a sound, a hum that I recognized all too well. The sirens. They were louder now, closer, deafening. They twisted and warped into something more malevolent, more unearthly. They weren't just alarms anymore. They were voices howling from some distant place, like the wails of souls lost to the fold. I tried to move, but my limbs were frozen, my body locked in place by the gravity of the thing in front of me. It wasn't just the figure anymore. The fold was alive. The land, the air, the trees, they were all part of it now, part of the hunger that stretched far beyond the boundaries of this cursed town. Everything around me seemed to distort, as if the world itself was folding, warping into a shape I couldn't comprehend. "Help me." Isabel's voice echoed, distant and weak, but it was enough to tear me from the fog that had clouded my thoughts. I could see her flickering in and out of existence like a glitch in a broken picture. Her face was pale, eyes wide with terror, as if she were trapped between worlds. I couldn't let her vanish like that. I couldn't let anyone vanish. The figure, the embodiment of the fold, slowly raised one of its long, skeletal arms toward me. Its fingers were elongated, tipped with razor-sharp claws. It opened its mouth, that gaping maw, and I felt the weight of its hunger pressing down on me. It wasn't just hunger for flesh, it was hunger for time, for memories, for everything I had ever known. It wanted me. And in that moment, something inside me broke. With a raw, desperate cry, I fought against the invisible force that held me in place. My mind, clouded with fear and confusion, locked onto one thing. Isabel. I had to save her. The sirens howled louder, deafening now, filling my mind with a chaotic, maddening noise. The fold's tendrils wrapped around me, pulling at my body, my soul. I felt it, the suffocating weight of its presence, the way it twisted the very fabric of reality. But in that moment, I also felt a spark of defiance, a thread of resistance that refused to snap. Not yet. I lunged forward, breaking free of the hold on me. I ran toward Isabel, my legs shaky, my heart pounding in my chest. The figure let out a guttural sound, half growl, half laugh, and it began to move toward me, slow but inevitable. The ground beneath me cracked open, and I stumbled, my feet sliding on the uneven earth. I reached out toward Isabel, but the air around her was thick, suffocating. Her form flickered again, closer this time, but still intangible, like she was slipping between worlds. I could almost hear her, faint and distant, calling for me. The more I reached for her, the more she seemed to pull away. The fold wasn't just a force of nature. It wasn't just a curse. It was a conduit to something much worse, something that existed outside of time and space. A hunger that could never be sated, a darkness that devoured everything. And Isabel had become part of that darkness. "No," I shouted, reaching out again. "You're not lost. You're not gone. I won't let you go." But she didn't hear me. Her face, already pale, was now blank, empty, like she was nothing more than a hollow shell. She took a slow step backward, her body flickering again, like she was fading into the void. I could feel the pressure building around me. The fold was closing in, ready to consume everything. The trees seemed to lean toward us, the air thick with an unnatural stillness. It felt like the very ground was sinking beneath me. I had to make a choice. I couldn't save Isabel, not like this. There was only one way to stop it, to end it, to end the cycle. I turned away from her, feeling the weight of my decision in every inch of my being. The sirens screamed louder, so loud it felt like my skull would crack open. But through the pain, I knew I had to face it. The fold had to be stopped, or it would consume everything. It had already taken so much twisted reality to its will. I faced the figure, the embodiment of the fold, the darkness that had twisted the town, twisted the people into these shadows. Its form loomed over me, its claws stretching toward me like a predator about to strike. But I wasn't afraid anymore. "You will not take me," I said, my voice steady despite the terror that gripped my chest. The words felt heavy in my mouth, but they carried weight. "I won't let you." The figure's maw opened wider, but before it could make its move, I took a step forward. Then another. And then I ran. I didn't know what I expected, but I didn't wait to find out. I charged at it full force. The world around me twisted and bent, the ground buckling beneath my feet, but I didn't stop. I had no plan, no backup, just pure instinct. And then I was through it. The air shattered like glass, a violent crack that echoed through the entire town, shaking the very foundation of the fold. The figure let out a scream, a sound that should have shattered my mind, but I kept moving. I didn't stop, didn't hesitate, I just ran. And then everything stopped. The sirens, the shadow, the suffocating pressure. It all vanished. I collapsed on the ground, gasping for air, my body shaking, soaked in sweat. For the first time in what felt like forever, the world was quiet. The oppressive weight had lifted. I looked around. The town was still there, but something had changed. The air felt lighter, the earth no longer trembling beneath my feet. The sky was still black, but the stars had shifted. They weren't the same ones I had seen before. I stood up slowly, looking for any sign of what had happened. The forest was silent. No more whispers, no more distorted figures in the distance, but there was one thing left. Isabel was still there, standing at the edge of the town, her face now full of life, her eyes wide and clear. She smiled at me, gently, with no fear in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered, and for the first time in days, I felt the weight of everything, of the curse, of the fold, lift completely. It was over, at least I thought it was. Before we move on, please donate me in the form of subscribe.